I never planned to end up working nights at a gas station off a dead stretch of highway in Nevada. But life doesn't care what you plan. It just corners you. And when rent kept going up while my savings bled out after dropping out of college, I grabbed the first job I could find that didn't ask too many questions. The manager, Harris, just looked at me, shoved a stack of forms across the counter, and said, "Night shift starts at 11, don't fall asleep. Don't screw with the pumps," and that was it. No orientation, no warning, just keys, a stiff polyester uniform, and a coffee machine that smelled like burnt dirt. So when I walked in on my very first night, I was more worried about staying awake than anything else. The desert wind was howling. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the whole place smelled faintly of oil and dust. At 11:47 p.m., the bell over the door chimed, and I looked up expecting some trucker or drunk kid. Instead, it was a man in a filthy suit carrying a wad of bills in his hand. He didn't say a word, just slapped a 20 on the counter and pointed to the cheap coffee. I rang it up, gave him change, and when I picked up the bill to shove it into the drawer, my stomach twisted. The paper was damp, soggy almost, as if it had been soaked in water or mud. I looked at his shoes, bone dry, the floor, bone dry. The desert outside hadn't seen rain in weeks. But this 20 felt like it had been pulled straight out of a river. I tried to keep a straight face, slid the bill into the drawer, and by the time I glanced back up, he was gone. Not walking out, not getting into a car, just gone. The bell hadn't chimed, the lot was empty, and I swear to God I felt my hand trembling as I shut the drawer. I told myself I was just tired, nerves making things seem stranger than they were. But when I opened the register again to double check, the 20 wasn't damp anymore, it was crisp, bone dry, like nothing had happened at all. Harris had said nothing about this. No mention of weird customers or wet bills, just don't screw with the pumps. But something about the way the man's eyes had slid over me. Flat, uninterested, as if I was just background noise, stuck in my head the rest of the shift. I tried not to think about it until midnight rolled around and the bell rang again. This time no one stepped inside, just the bell, clear as day. The glass door stayed shut, the lot empty, the desert wind pushing sand across the asphalt. And for the first time I thought maybe Harris had left something out. Maybe there were rules here no one bothered to tell me. Rules you only learned if you survived long enough to need them. By the time the clock hit 1 in the morning, I'd convinced myself the $20 bill incident and the phantom door chime were just first-night jitters. Nerves amplified by too much caffeine, and the kind of silence you only get in the desert. A silence so deep it presses on your chest like weight. But the thing about silence out here is that it doesn't last. It always gets broken. Usually by the wind, sometimes by coyotes. And that night by something far stranger. I was behind the counter stacking packs of gum when I felt this itch under my palm against the wood. Like paper stuck to it. I slid my hand under and my fingers brushed against duct tape. I tugged and something peeled off. A folded sheet of yellowed paper, brittle, edges curled, taped flat against the underside of the counter where no customer would see. The handwriting was messy but bold, black marker fading to gray, and at the top in all caps it said, "Rules for the midnight shift." There were 7 bullet points beneath it, each one short, almost too short, but even as I read them, my throat went dry. Like these weren't rules meant to be ignored. Rule 1, lock the door after midnight no matter what. Rule 2, if the bell rings and no one's there, do not open the door. Rule 3, customers who pay with wet money. Do not question them, just take it. Rule 4, never go outside between 3 and 3:15. Rule 5, if you hear knocking from the bathroom stall, ignore it. Rule 6, if a car pulls up but you don't hear an engine, don't look directly at the driver. Rule 7, never, under any circumstances, turn off the lights. I stared at the list, my pulse hammering because I'd already broken one of them. I'd looked for the man with the damp bill. I'd checked the lot, and I'd noticed his shoes were dry. I'd questioned it. And if this list was serious, that meant I'd already screwed up. I looked around the empty station. Humming lights, coolers buzzing, the smell of burnt coffee. All of it normal except for the paper in my hand. I folded it, shoved it into my pocket, and sat back down on the stool, suddenly hyper-aware of every creak and hum. Harris hadn't said a damn word about rules. Hadn't mentioned anything beyond pumps and staying awake. So why hide them under the counter unless he didn't want me to see until I was already committed, already locked into the shift? The thought made my skin crawl, and I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone even when the place was empty. At 2:07, the bell chimed again. I froze, the sound loud in the quiet. I looked up. The glass door rattled slightly as if touched, but no one was outside. I remembered Rule 2. My fingers twitched toward the knob, then stopped. My hand shook as I stepped back from the door, eyes locked on the empty lot. The longer I stared, the more I thought I saw a shape out in the sand. Pale still, too far to make out but close enough to know it wasn't a trick of light. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there until I turned my head for half a second, and when I looked back it was gone. I stumbled back behind the counter and clutched the folded paper like it was scripture. At 2:30 Harris called, his voice flat like he'd just woken up. "You found the list, didn't you?" It wasn't a question. I didn't answer at first, then muttered, "Yeah." He sighed, long and heavy. "Just follow them and you'll be fine. Don't improvise, don't get curious. That's how the last guy," he cut himself off. Silence. I asked what happened to the last guy, but he only said, "Don't be a hero, Evan. Just survive," and hung up, the line dead. The chill in his voice stuck with me, like he was speaking from experience, like he'd already buried someone because of these rules. I spent the next half hour pacing the narrow aisles, trying to burn the rules into memory. Door locked after midnight, check. Don't open for the bell, check. Don't question wet money, already failed. Stay inside at 3 hour, bathroom knocking, driver with no engine. Never turn off the lights. I repeated them over and over until they blurred together, until 2:59 crept up on me and the buzzing in my ears got so loud I thought maybe I was losing it. I sat on the stool, eyes fixed on the clock, the second hand ticking toward 3. Then the hum of the coolers dimmed, not off, just lower, like someone had turned the world's volume knob down, and the air outside the glass door seemed heavier, thicker. I gripped the counter and forced myself to stay put. At 3:04 came the sound of footsteps outside. Slow, dragging, like someone walking barefoot on gravel. I fought the urge to look out the window. Every muscle tight, I whispered to myself, "Don't move." "Don't move?" The steps circled the building, sometimes pausing, sometimes scraping along the wall. Once stopping right by the bathroom door, I held my breath. And that's when the knocking started. Steady 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. Coming from inside the locked stall I'd checked earlier when I cleaned. I clenched my teeth and stared straight ahead. The knocking grew louder, faster, like fists pounding, then silence. And just as suddenly as it began, it ended at 3:15. The coolers hummed louder again, the air lightened, and I realized my nails had dug crescents into the counter. Sweat dripping down my temples. I wanted to run, to quit, but I remembered Harris's warning. Don't be a hero, just survive, and that told me quitting wasn't an option. Not unless I wanted to end up like the last guy. Whoever he was, so I stayed, shaking, counting the minutes until dawn, the rules burning in my pocket. A promise and a curse. By the time the clock crawled past 4, I'd stopped shaking, but the rules never left my head. They sat heavy in my pocket like an extra organ keeping me alive. Every hum of the coolers and buzz of the fluorescent lights felt louder than normal. The kind of sound you only notice when you're waiting for something worse. And I was waiting. I think deep down I already knew it wasn't just superstition, because the way Harris's voice had gone flat when I mentioned the list, the way he cut himself off when he started talking about the last guy, it wasn't theory, it was memory. Around 4:30, the bell finally chimed again, and this time a customer actually stepped through the door. Or at least I thought it was a customer. He was tall, maybe 6'5", wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a long coat despite the desert heat. The coat looked stiff, like it hadn't been bent in years, and the first thing I noticed wasn't his size but the silence. No footsteps, no sound of shoes on tile, just the bell and then him already 3 steps inside. He moved straight to the back cooler, opened the door, grabbed a soda, and came to the counter without meeting my eyes. He set it down and pushed forward a crumpled $5 bill. I reached for it but froze. The rule burned in my brain. Never look directly at the driver if you don't hear an engine. And I realized it had been the same here. No sound of the cooler door creaking. No fizz when the bottle cap twisted. No footsteps, no sound at all except the bell. My fingers hovered over the bill, damp again, clammy, like it had just come out of someone's mouth. I shoved it into the drawer without comment and scanned the soda. My throat dry as dust, I slid it back to him and he took it, still never raising his head. And when he turned to leave, I caught something I shouldn't have. Just a sliver beneath the brim of his cap. The skin of his jaw too pale, too smooth, like clay stretched too thin. My stomach lurched and I looked down fast, suddenly fascinated by the register. The hum of the drawer sliding closed. Anything to avoid staring. The bell chimed again and when I looked up he was gone. The lot empty. Not a car in sight, and the soda was still on the counter, condensation dripping like sweat. I swear it hadn't moved an inch. I stepped back, heart pounding. And that's when I made my second mistake. I checked the camera feed. 4 black and white screens bolted above the counter. Cheap, grainy footage of the lot. The aisles, the door, and the bathroom hall. On every feed, the station looked normal, except for one detail. On the parking lot camera, a car was there. An old sedan, boxy, dark, no license plate, headlights off. Sitting dead center in the lot, I hadn't heard it pull up. Hadn't seen it through the glass when I'd looked outside. It just sat there still as stone. No driver inside, no movement. I flipped back to the register camera and felt my chest tighten. The soda was gone, the counter clear. But I hadn't touched it. I hadn't heard the bell. I replayed the tape on the old system. The static lines cutting across the screen. And in the grainy footage, there was never a man at the counter, never a soda, never a bill, just me standing alone, staring at nothing, talking to the air like an idiot. I slammed the monitor off and forced myself not to puke, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles went white. I remembered Rule 6, don't look at the driver. But what the hell do you do when the driver isn't there? When the car sits waiting with no one behind the wheel? I spent the next 30 minutes glancing between the glass door and the lot, praying dawn would come early. Around 5:10, another vehicle rolled up. This time I heard it, the rumble of an engine. Headlights sweeping the lot, a beat-up pickup. And relief hit me so hard my knees went weak. A real person, I thought, please God, just a real person. A man in his 50s stepped out, belly hanging over his belt, grumbling as he grabbed a coffee and some jerky. He paid with dry, crumpled bills and even cracked a joke about the gas prices, his voice cutting through the fog in my head like sunlight. And I laughed harder than I should have, desperate. I shoved his change at him and he looked at me funny before heading out. The bell chimed, headlights flicked on, and his truck drove away, leaving me alone again. That's when I noticed the sedan was still there. Still no driver, no movement, just waiting. I grabbed the list out of my pocket and read Rule 6 again. The words smudged like they'd been rewritten in a hurry. If a car pulls up but you don't hear an engine, don't look directly at the driver. It didn't say anything about what to do if there is no driver at all. The gap in the rule chilled me more than the words themselves, like whoever wrote it knew but didn't want to spell it out. At 5:30, the sun started to gray the edges of the desert horizon, and for the first time all night I let out a shaky laugh because I was still breathing. I'd followed the rules mostly, except the wet money, and maybe that was why the sedan hadn't left. Maybe it was waiting for me to screw up again. By 6, the day shift guy hadn't shown. Harris hadn't called back and the sedan was still there, so I sat with my eyes locked on the register, refusing to look up at the glass, refusing to blink too long. Because deep down I knew if I ever saw the inside of that car clearly, if I saw what sat in the driver's seat, I wouldn't be walking out of this job alive. By the time the first orange streaks of daylight hit the windows, I was running on fumes, jittery from too much coffee and nerves, but alive. The lot was still empty except for that damned sedan sitting silent under the sun. No driver, no plate, no dust, even though everything else out here got coated within hours. I refused to look straight at it, I'd learned that much. But my eyes kept darting back like magnets. It was still there when Harris finally pulled in, his old Ford groaning as it parked beside the pumps. He slammed the door, strode in with a cigarette hanging off his lip, and said nothing at first, just glanced at me and then at the register. The drawer cracked open from the last sale. I blurted out before I could stop myself. "It's still here." He gave me a sharp look, followed my eyes to the lot, and for the first time since I'd met him, Harris looked uneasy, just for a second. Like a mask slipped, then he muttered, "Don't mention it. Not in here." His voice low like the cameras could hear. He walked around, checked the pumps, flipped through the clipboard like any normal morning, but his hands shook faintly. I saw it when he tried to light his cigarette. The match stuttered. I followed him behind the counter, slammed the folded list down. "You didn't tell me about this." My voice cracked with anger and exhaustion. Harris took a long drag, smoke curling up, and exhaled slow. "You weren't supposed to see that your first night, but I guess the station wanted you to." He tapped ash into the tray like we were discussing paperwork, not survival. "The station?" I repeated, my throat dry. "You make it sound like the building's alive." He didn't look at me, just said, "Alive isn't the word, but it's older than you think. Older than the road out there, older than me. And I've been stuck here 30 years, I stared. Pulse thudding. "Then what about the customers? The man with the wet money, the sedan with no driver. Harris cut me off, slamming his palm on the counter. You follow the rules, you don't ask questions. That's how you last, the ones who got curious. They didn't make it to their next shift. The way his eyes darted to the bathroom hall when he said that made my stomach clench, like he was remembering something he'd cleaned up himself. I wanted to press him, to demand what happened. But I remembered his warning from the phone. Don't be a hero, survive, so I bit down my anger. Still, I couldn't let it go. Why keep this place open then? Why let people walk in at all? Harris gave me a humorless smile. Because they're not all people, and because this station isn't here for gas, it's here for them. We just keep it running, keep the lights on so they don't wander farther out. His words landed like ice water. My knees weak. You mean it's containment, I whispered. Harris didn't confirm, didn't deny, just ground out his cigarette and said, go home, sleep, be back tonight. If you can't handle it, don't come back, but if you do, memorize the rules because they're the only reason you're still breathing. He left me with that, walking out to his truck, and I followed him to the door despite myself. Squinting at the lot, the sedan was gone. Just gone, no tire marks, no dust disturbed. As if it had never been there, Harris glanced at the empty space, and for half a second, I thought I saw relief cross his face. Then he drove away, and I was left staring at sunlight bouncing off empty asphalt, wondering if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. I stumbled home, collapsed into bed, but sleep was no escape. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale jaw under the brim of a cap, heard the soda bottle fizzing in silence, felt the wet 20 in my hand. I jolted awake around noon, drenched in sweat. The list still in my pocket crumpled from my grip. I kept rereading it like it would change, like some hidden note would appear between the lines, but it never did. And that told me something worse, that there were gaps in the rules, situations left out, things I would just have to figure out if I survived long enough to face them. By the time I dragged myself back for the next shift, the desert sky was a deep bleeding red. And Harris wasn't waiting, the lot empty, the pumps dark, but the lights inside buzzed like always, steady, demanding. I unlocked the door with trembling hands, stepped behind the counter, and before I even clocked in, I checked under the register, praying for another page, something more. But all I found was splintered wood where the tape had been. The station had given me what it wanted already. The rest I'd have to earn. When I came in for my third night, my hands were still shaking from the conversation with Harris, his words circling in my head like flies. They're not all people. This place isn't here for gas, it's here for them. I thought about quitting every second that afternoon, but by 10:30 I was already behind the counter again, coffee in hand, staring out at the desert like a man walking back into a fire he knew was still burning. The rules sat folded in my pocket, soft from being handled too many times, and I repeated them in my head like a prayer. Lock the door after midnight, don't open it if the bell rings. Don't question wet money. Stay inside between 3 and 3:15. Ignore the bathroom stall. Don't look at the driver, keep the lights on. 7 commandments keeping me alive. But I couldn't stop thinking about the gaps. The situations not mentioned, the parts Harris wouldn't talk about. Like the station itself was testing how badly I wanted to survive. Business was steady at first. A couple of truckers, a woman with 2 kids grabbing snacks. All of them real, normal, voices loud, footsteps audible, laughter sharp. The kind of noise that felt like salvation after 2 nights of silence and wet bills. I clung to it, rung them up, smiled too wide, shoved their change at them, desperate for proof the world still made sense. But then midnight hit, I locked the door, slid the bolt, and waited for the quiet to return, and return it did. Heavy, suffocating. At 12:22 the bell rang and my stomach dropped. The glass door rattled like something wanted in. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Rule 2 screamed in my head. Don't open the door no matter what. The bell rang again, longer, like whoever or whatever was outside was leaning on it. I backed away, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glass. And that's when I saw her. A girl maybe 10 years old standing barefoot on the lot. Her dress thin and white. Her hair a dark curtain hiding her face. She lifted her hand and pressed it flat against the glass. I swear I felt the cold through the door. She mouthed something, lips forming words I couldn't hear, and my chest constricted, every instinct screamed to unlock the door, to help her, but the rule burned in my head. I gritted my teeth, whispered no, and forced myself back behind the counter. The bell stopped. Silence returned. I thought it was over until I heard it. Faint at first, then louder, crying. The girl's voice muffled like it was coming through water. Please, it's cold, let me in. over and over. I shoved my hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. It seeped into my skull, dragged me to the door. I shut my eyes, leaned against the counter, whispered the rules to myself. And when I finally looked again, the lot was empty. No girl, no footprints, no sound but my own ragged breathing. I almost collapsed in relief until the bathroom door slammed, hard enough to rattle the shelves. I stumbled back, heart hammering. Rule 5 shouted in my skull. Ignore the knocking, but this wasn't knocking. This was something pounding like it wanted to break free. The stall door shook on its hinges, the lock clattering, then silence, absolute. I didn't move for minutes, eyes fixed on the hallway, until I realized the clock was ticking closer to 3. Dread settling heavy in my gut, I braced myself, knowing the footsteps would come, the dragging sound outside circling the building. I sat on the stool, clutched the counter, forced myself not to look, but at 3:07 a sound shattered the pattern. Someone screamed outside, a man's voice tearing through the desert night. Desperate, panicked, "Help me! Please, it's got me!" My blood went cold. No one had screamed before. No one had called for help. I thought of Harris's words. Don't be a hero, survive, but my body moved on its own. I grabbed the door handle before my brain caught up. Rule 4 warned never to go outside between 3 and 3:15. But the man screamed again, closer this time, like he was right on the lot. I yanked the door open, night air slamming into me dry and sharp. I stumbled onto the asphalt, scanning the dark. "Where are you?" I yelled, my voice cracking, but the lot was empty. The desert silent, then behind me the door slammed shut, hard. The bolt sliding into place on its own, I spun, pounded the glass, but the lights inside flickered, and for a heartbeat I swore I saw something moving between the aisles. Tall, wrong, its limbs too long for the shelves. I froze. The man's scream echoed again, but this time it was inside my skull, not outside, and I realized too late I'd broken the rule. I stumbled back, heart crashing in my chest, and the door unlocked by itself, swinging open slow, inviting. I staggered back inside, slammed it behind me, and pressed my forehead to the cool glass, sweat soaking my shirt. The clock ticked past 3:15 and the air lightened. The hum of the coolers returned. The rules had held. But I hadn't. I broke one, I went outside, and I knew it hadn't gone unnoticed. Because when I stumbled back behind the counter, gasping for breath, there was a new piece of paper taped where the old one had been. Fresh ink, a new rule scrawled in the same messy hand. Rule 8. Break one and it remembers you. When the sun finally bled across the horizon and my shift ended, I couldn't move, my legs were stiff, my shirt clung to me with dried sweat, and my eyes locked on that new paper taped under the counter. Rule 8, break one and it remembers you. The words burned into me. No explanation, no comfort, just a promise. Harris pulled up at 7 like nothing had happened, his Ford groaning. The sound of gravel crunching under his tires, jolting me awake. He walked in, scanned the aisles, glanced at me, and froze when he saw the paper. His cigarette slipped from his lips unlit. He bent down, read it, and for the first time I saw fear crack his face, real fear. He didn't touch it, didn't move it, just muttered, "God damn it." "Evan," his voice shaking, I tried to explain. The scream, the door slamming, how I thought someone needed help. But Harris cut me off sharp. "Doesn't matter what you thought, you stepped outside. Now it knows you." I slammed my hand on the counter. "What the hell does that mean?" "What is it?" Harris grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "It means you don't get to screw up again. It'll test you now. It'll want you to break the rest." His eyes locked on mine, bloodshot, unblinking. "You don't get a second mistake." He let go and lit his cigarette, hands shaking. "You want out? This is your last chance. Don't come back tonight. Walk away, but if you do come back, you're marked." I wanted to quit right then. Wanted to run until the desert swallowed me, but something anchored me. Maybe fear, maybe stubbornness. Maybe the way Harris said marked, like I'd already crossed a line, like leaving wouldn't change it. I stumbled home, collapsed on my mattress, but sleep didn't come. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard that scream. That pounding on the stall door, saw the girl's hand on the glass. When I finally drifted, I dreamed of the lot, empty except for the sedan. And when I walked up to it, the window rolled down slow, revealing nothing but black inside, and in the black, 2 pale hands pressed against the glass. Too long, too thin. I woke gasping, nails dug into my palms, skin stinging. I didn't want to go back, but by 10:30 I was behind the counter again, my body moving like a man marching to execution. The station lights buzzed like they were glad to see me. The lot empty, but the air heavy, charged. I checked under the counter. The list sat there, all 8 rules now. The ink of the new one still darker than the rest. Harris hadn't removed it, hadn't added a warning, just left it, like it was carved in stone. Midnight came. I locked the door, heart hammering, and tried to distract myself with real work. Inventory, receipts, counting the register, anything to ground me. At 12:47, the bell chimed. Rule 2 screamed in my skull. I didn't move, didn't look. But then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and froze. The notification on the screen was a text from my mother. Except she'd been dead 5 years. The message said, "Open the door, Evan." I dropped the phone like it burned. Backed away, the bell chimed again. Long, insistent. My phone lit up on the floor with another text. "Don't you love me?" I kicked it under the counter and pressed my hands to my ears, whispering the rules like a prayer. After 5 minutes, the buzzing stopped. Silence returned. I sagged in relief, but that's when I noticed something new. Faint scratches etched into the inside of the glass door. Words scrawled in jagged lines. "I remember you." I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. Rule 8 wasn't a warning, it was a sentence. The station itself had marked me. I tried to calm down, forced myself into routine. At 2, a real customer came in, a teenage kid with acne grabbing chips and soda. He paid with dry, crumpled ones, made a joke about finals, his voice loud and human. I almost hugged him, desperate for normalcy. But when he left, I checked the receipt and my blood ran cold. The timestamp printed at the bottom said 3:04 a.m., not 2:01 like the register clock showed. I looked up and realized the hands on the wall clock weren't moving, frozen just past 2. The hum of the coolers dimmed. The air thickened. It wasn't 3 yet, but it was acting like it. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look. I just shoved it deep in my pocket. At 2:59, the clock jumped, the second hand jerking forward, and the real 3 o'clock hit. This time the footsteps came quicker, circling fast, scraping like claws on asphalt. I clenched the counter, repeated the rules. Don't move, don't look, don't go outside. The steps paused at the bathroom again, and the knocking started, slow at first, then violent. I shut my eyes, clenched my teeth, sweat dripping down my neck. But then another sound cut through, my name whispered from the stall. Evan, over and over like a voice I knew. My mother's again, pleading, "Please help me." I pressed my fist to my ears, screamed shut up until my throat burned. The whisper stopped. Silence fell heavy. When I opened my eyes, the clock read 3:16. The coolers roared back to life and the air lightened. But I wasn't relieved, not really, because when I glanced at the security monitors, the lot camera showed the sedan parked dead center again. Only this time the driver's side window was rolled halfway down, black inside, waiting. I switched the monitor off and whispered to myself, "It remembers me." Because I knew now it wasn't going away, not until it got what it wanted. When my shift ended that morning, Harris didn't even bother pretending anymore. He just looked at me across the counter and said, "Go straight home, don't stop. Don't talk to anyone," his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling around a half-burned cigarette. I wanted to demand answers, to scream at him for keeping me in the dark. But the words died in my throat because I already knew what he'd say. That nothing I did mattered anymore, not after Rule 8. I drove home through the desert with the rising sun burning my windshield. And for a few blessed minutes I let myself believe daylight made me safe. But when I pulled into the cracked lot of my apartment building, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. My sedan, my old rusted Toyota, was parked where I'd left it. But 2 spaces over sat another car. Dark, boxy, familiar. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, told myself it couldn't be the same one from the station. Not miles away, not in broad daylight. But the way the dust curved around its tires, untouched, clean, it looked wrong. I forced myself inside, locked the door behind me, and collapsed onto the couch. Sleep came fast, but it wasn't rest. I dreamed of the girl pressing her hand against the glass, of the voice calling my name from the bathroom, of the sedan's window rolling down slow to reveal nothing but black. When I woke, the room was dim, late afternoon shadows stretching long, and my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. No number, just unknown. My thumb hovered before I pressed play. Static at first, then a voice, low, stretched, whispering, "Evan, I remember you." I dropped the phone. Heart hammering, sweat slick on my back. The apartment felt smaller, tighter. Every corner darker than it should have been. I turned on every light, even the bathroom, even the closet. Sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, muttering, "It can't follow me here, it can't." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The next shift came too fast. the desert swallowing the sun as I drove back, and I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me the whole way. Every pair of headlights in my rear view felt like that sedan. Every shadow between the sagebrush felt like something waiting. I pulled into the station lot and there it was again. Parked dead center, no driver, no plate, headlights dark. Harris stood out front smoking, his face grim when he saw where I was looking. "Don't acknowledge it," he said flat, like we were talking about a stray dog. "If it follows you home, don't acknowledge it either. It feeds on that," I swallowed hard. "It already has," I whispered, told him about the voicemail. "About the car in my apartment lot?" His jaw tightened. "Then you're running out of time," he said, stubbing out his cigarette. Walking back inside, the shift dragged on. Customers came and went, some real, some I wasn't sure of. One man paid with a bill so cold it frosted my fingers. I shoved it in the drawer without comment. Another walked the aisles for 20 minutes without ever picking anything up before slipping out. Silent as smoke, I kept the rules, clung to them. Didn't break a single one, but I felt it anyway. Pressing in closer. Waiting, at 3:10 the footsteps circled the building again. Faster this time, heavier, like it knew I was inside and wanted me to know it knew. The knocking from the stall came in double time. Frantic, then stopped all at once. And in the silence I heard it, faint, behind me, not outside. Not the bathroom, but behind the counter. A whisper low against my ear. "You can't hide at home," I spun. Nothing there. The lights flickered, but held. I pressed my back against the counter until the clock clicked to 3:16. And the air lightened. When my shift ended, I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. I drove aimlessly through the empty highways, hoping distance mattered. But when I finally pulled into my lot at dawn, the dark sedan was there, waiting. Parked in my assigned space this time, the window still rolled halfway down. Inside, nothing but black. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel, refusing to look directly at it, but I could feel it. Heavy as gravity. Pulling, I stumbled upstairs, locked the door, shoved a chair under the knob, collapsed on my bed, and that's when I noticed the paper taped to my nightstand. The same messy handwriting as the station list, 8 rules copied word for word, and beneath them a 9th added in darker ink. Rule 9, home is not safe anymore. When I first saw the paper taped to my nightstand, I told myself it had to be a trick. That maybe Harris had broken into my place, maybe he wanted to scare me into quitting. But the more I stared at the jagged handwriting, the less I believed that. Harris might be cruel, but he wasn't careless, and this wasn't his style. The paper looked aged already, corners curled, like it had been waiting there for years. Rule 9, home is not safe anymore. I ripped it down, crumpled it, threw it across the room, but the words had already sunk in. My apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. The walls too thin, the shadows too deep. I kept every light on and tried to convince myself it was paranoia. Until the next night when I came home after my shift, bone-tired, and found another paper taped to my fridge. Rule 10, do not use the mirror after midnight. I stared at it, pulse hammering. Because I hadn't told anyone about my bathroom mirror. Hadn't told anyone that for the past 2 nights I'd seen something in it. Not my reflection exactly, but something slower. A half-second delay when I moved, like the glass was remembering me instead of showing me. I tested it right then, waved my hand in front of the mirror, and for the briefest moment I saw a second hand lagging behind. Thinner, paler. My stomach lurched and I slammed the bathroom light off. Rule 10 wasn't a warning. It was confirmation I wasn't imagining it. I spent the next day in a haze, unable to rest, jumping at every sound from the hallway. When my upstairs neighbor dropped something heavy, I nearly screamed. When someone knocked on the wrong door, I held my breath until they left. And every time I blinked, I saw the sedan in my mind, waiting in my lot. Its window rolled down just enough for me to know it could roll further. The next shift was a blur. Real customers came and went, but I barely registered them. All I could think about was what would be waiting for me at home. And when I returned at dawn, I wasn't disappointed. Another paper. This time taped to the inside of my front door where I couldn't miss it. Rule 11. Never answer when someone knocks between 2 and 4 a.m. The words twisted my gut because last night, right around 3, I'd heard knocking in the hall, slow, deliberate. Not at my door, but moving along the row of apartments, each knock echoing down the plaster like footsteps. I hadn't answered, but not because of the rule. Because I'd been too scared to move. Now the rule made it real, codified it. Like the station's list had spread here, duplicating, evolving, turning my life into a second shift I couldn't clock out of. I tried to talk to Harris, cornered him before my next night, shoved the paper in his hand. It's spreading. It's in my apartment now, I hissed. Harris went pale, his cigarette burning low between his fingers. He didn't even look at the words, just muttered, "Then it's chosen you." My chest tightened. Chosen me for what? Harris shook his head, eyes distant. "You don't want to know, just keep following the rules. Whatever they are, wherever they show up, it's the only way." He walked away before I could stop him, leaving me colder than before. That night I obeyed Rule 10, turned every mirror to the wall, draped towels over the reflective surfaces, and sat in the kitchen with the list spread out before me like a Bible. I whispered them under my breath until my throat ached. And right on schedule at 2:17 the knocking began. Steady, patient, moving closer down the hall. I sat frozen, every muscle tight, sweat pooling under my arms. The knocks reached my door, 3 hard raps, the sound vibrating through the wood. I bit down on my tongue until blood filled my mouth, anything to keep from answering. The knocks came again, louder, and a voice followed. "Evan, open up, it's me!" The voice of my dead mother, sweet and warm, too perfect. "Please, honey, just let me in." My throat closed. Tears pricked my eyes. I wanted it to be real. Wanted it so bad my hand twitched toward the knob. But Rule 11 burned in my mind. I forced my hand away, pressed it flat against the table until my knuckles cracked. "I can't," I whispered. "You're not her." Silence. Then a slow dragging sound like nails trailing across the door. And finally nothing. I didn't breathe again until 4:01. When the air lightened, the refrigerator hummed back louder, the lights brighter. I staggered to the door and checked the peephole. The hall was empty, but etched deep into the wood were fresh scratches, letters carved with precision. "Remember," I stumbled back, bile rising, because I knew exactly what it meant. Rule 8 had promised it would remember me, and now my apartment was carrying out the threat, spreading new rules, new traps, and no matter how carefully I obeyed, it wasn't going to stop. Not until I understood what it wanted or until it finally decided to collect. I lasted 2 nights following the new rules at home. 2 nights of covering every mirror with towels, of sitting at the kitchen table staring at the clock from 2 to 4, while the knocking passed along the hall, whispering my name. 2 nights of choking down my terror like bitter medicine. But on the 3rd night something inside me cracked. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe stubbornness. Maybe I just couldn't stand the idea of being nothing more than a rat in a maze, following instructions from something I didn't understand. But I made a choice, a stupid one. I decided to break a rule on purpose. Rule 10 was the one I picked, the mirror. It felt safer than the knocking, safer than opening the door. I told myself it was only glass, that it couldn't reach me if I didn't let it. So I left the bathroom mirror uncovered, sat on the closed toilet lid at 12:05 a.m., with the light buzzing overhead, staring at my reflection. At first nothing happened, just me, hollow-eyed, skin pale from too many sleepless nights, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. My reflection didn't blink when I didn't twitch when I shifted. Half a second lag turned into a full second, then 2, and then it smiled. A thin, cruel smile that never touched my face. My stomach clenched. I forced myself not to move, not to breathe, and my reflection lifted its hand. Slow, deliberate, pressing its palm to the glass, my own hand sat rigid in my lap, unmoving. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I leaned closer, whispering, "What do you want from me?" And my reflection's lips moved out of sync with mine, whispering back, "You broke it." My heart lurched. I stumbled back, knocking into the sink. The lights flickered and the glass rippled like water. For a split second, I thought it was going to step through. I slapped a towel over it, backed out of the bathroom, slammed the door. I paced the apartment until dawn, shaking, whispering prayers I hadn't believed in since I was a kid. And when I finally dared to check the mirror again at 9 a.m., the towel was gone. The glass cracked down the middle like something had pressed from the other side. Etched into the foggy surface were 3 words. "See you soon." I wanted to run, pack a bag and vanish, but where would I go? The desert was worse, the station waited, and Rule 9 had already told me home wasn't safe. I tried to call Harris that afternoon, demanded to know if the rules could spread, if anyone else had them follow them home, but he didn't pick up. Voicemail after voicemail, silence. When I showed up at the station that night, he looked at me once and said, "You look like hell." I slammed my fist on the counter, hissed, "It's in my apartment now, I saw it in the mirror." Harris froze. His jaw tight, he whispered low, "You broke one, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He saw it on my face. He grabbed my collar, pulled me close, his eyes wide for the first time since I'd known him. "You can't keep doing that. It's not just remembering you anymore. It's learning you." He shoved me back, lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "From now on, every reflection you see, every shadow you hear, that's it trying to find a way through. And you're the one holding the door open." My knees went weak. I whispered, "Then what am I supposed to do?" Harris shook his head. Exhaled smoke. "Follow the rules, every single one, no matter how insane. And pray it loses interest before you run out of paper." His words didn't comfort me. They made it worse because deep down I knew it wasn't going to lose interest. Not now. Not after I'd broken one at home. When my shift ended, I drove back dreading what I'd find. I unlocked my apartment door, stepped inside, and stopped cold. Another paper taped to the inside wall. Rule 12. If you see yourself somewhere you shouldn't be, leave immediately. I stared at it, pulse roaring in my ears, and turned slowly toward the kitchen, where the dim light from the window hit the refrigerator just enough to show me my reflection in its stainless steel surface, standing there smiling even though I hadn't stepped past the doorway. The first time I saw myself standing in the kitchen when I was still in the doorway, I froze, every nerve in my body screaming to run. The paper on the wall burned in my mind. Rule 12. If you see yourself somewhere you shouldn't be, leave immediately. I stumbled back into the hall, slammed the door behind me and ran, not down the stairs, not to the lot where the sedan always waited, but up higher, lungs burning as I climbed to the roof. I burst out into the desert dawn, gasping, gripping the rusted railing until my hands bled. When I finally dared to look down through the grimy windows, I saw it me or something that wore my face, standing in my living room, head tilted, watching the door like it was waiting for me to come back. My knees buckled and I pressed myself against the concrete, whispering over and over, "Leave immediately. Leave immediately." Until the words blurred. I didn't go back for hours. Not until the sun was high and neighbors moved through the halls, laughing, carrying groceries, ordinary human. I finally crept back. My door wide open though I knew I'd locked it. Inside the apartment looked untouched except for one thing, another paper taped to the bathroom mirror. Rule 13. Never let the other you see where you sleep. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't just showing up, it was hunting me, probing for a way to replace me. I grabbed a bag, stuffed it with clothes, cash, anything I could carry, and left without looking back. I didn't even lock the door. What was the point? That night at the station, I cornered Harris, slammed the stack of rules down in front of him. Pages now torn, smudged with sweat, 13 rules in all. I hissed, "It's making more in my home. What the hell is happening to me?" Harris looked at the paper for a long time. Jaw tight, eyes unreadable, then finally muttered, "It's not making them, Evan, you are. Every time you break one, every time you think about resisting, it writes itself deeper into you, like carving initials into bark. You're bleeding new rules because it wants to see how much you'll endure before you break." I shook my head. No, I saw it. I saw myself in my apartment. "It's trying to take me." Harris didn't flinch. Didn't deny it, just said, "Then don't let it. Follow the rules. Keep the lights on, survive, that's all there is." I wanted to hit him. Wanted to scream that surviving wasn't enough if I wasn't even myself anymore. But before I could, the bell chimed. A real customer shuffled in. Some trucker buying coffee and cigarettes, his voice rough and blessedly human. Harris rung him up while I stood shaking, because in the reflection of the glass cooler I saw us both. Harris and me, but the me in the reflection wasn't shaking. He was smiling, slow, deliberate, eyes locked on me. I staggered back, nearly fell into the shelves. Harris grabbed my arm. "Don't look," he hissed, dragging me away. "If you acknowledge it here, it won't just follow you home. It'll stay." I clenched my fists until my nails cut skin, forced myself not to look at the glass again. The customer left, the bell chimed. Silence fell heavy. Harris finally whispered, "You've got to find somewhere it can't reach you. Somewhere without reflections, without doors, without rules. But I don't know if that place exists anymore." His words made my stomach clench because I already knew the truth. It wasn't bound to places, it was bound to me. When my shift ended, I didn't go back to my apartment. I drove aimlessly through the desert, headlights carving tunnels through the dark, the radio dead static. And no matter how far I went, the black sedan stayed in my rear view. 2 headlights glowing faint but steady, never gaining, never falling, just there. A shadow tethered to me. I pulled off into the sand, killed the engine, watched. The desert silent, the stars sharp above, and still the headlights waited patient. I sat there until dawn, clenching the wheel, whispering the rules, begging for some end, but I knew now there wasn't one. Not unless I broke the final rule it hadn't written yet, the one it was saving for last, the one that would decide whether I stayed me or became the smiling reflection waiting to take my place. I thought I could outdrive it, thought if I put enough miles between me and the apartment, maybe the reflection would fade. But no matter how far I went, the sedan's headlights were always there. Sometimes in the mirror, sometimes 2 cars back, sometimes parked on the shoulder ahead like it had skipped time to wait for me. When I finally rolled into the gas station for my shift, I sat in the car until Harris came out, leaning against the door frame, smoke curling in the neon light. "It's worse, isn't it?" he said flatly. I nodded, couldn't find words. "I saw it in the cooler," Harris muttered, flicking ash into the dirt. "It's not staying behind glass anymore, it's looking for cracks. And you've given it plenty." Anger flared in me, hot and bitter. "Then tell me how to stop it." Harris shook his head, voice low. "You don't stop it, you survive it. And sometimes survival means letting go of things you don't want to." The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he already knew what was coming. The bell above the door chimed and my blood went cold, because the man who walked in looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same tired eyes, same scar above the eyebrow I'd carried since I was 12. He didn't look at Harris, didn't look at the shelves. He looked straight at me and smiled, the same wrong smile from the mirror. "Evening," he said in my voice, casual, warm, wrong. My hand twitched toward the baseball bat under the counter, but Harris gripped my wrist hard. Whispered, "Rule 12, Evan, leave immediately." My chest tightened. "This is my station," I hissed. "Where am I supposed to go?" Harris's grip tightened. "Anywhere but here." But I couldn't move, couldn't look away. My double strolled through the aisles like a regular customer, fingers trailing along the shelves, humming under his breath, the hum matching my heartbeat, faster, faster. He stopped at the coffee machine, poured himself a cup, and the smell hit me. Too strong, too real. This wasn't reflection anymore, this was flesh. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice cracking. My double turned, smiled wider. "I'm what you could be if you'd just stop fighting. I'm the one who doesn't need rules." He raised the cup. "And I'm thirsty." I backed up. Heart pounding, Harris hissed, "Don't answer it." Don't acknowledge it, but it was too late, I already had. My double set the cup down, stepped closer, every footfall echoing like my own. "You can make this easy, Evan, just rest. Let me handle things from here. You don't even like this life, do you?" My throat closed. He was right. I hated the station, hated the fear, hated waking each day wondering what rule I'd break next. But the thought of giving in made bile rise. I gripped the bat, raised it. "You're not me," I growled. My double tilted his head, eyes flat. "Then prove it." Harris shoved me hard, breaking the moment, hissing, "Leave!" I stumbled through the back door into the desert night, the heat clinging to me like sweat. I ran to my car but froze. The sedan sat in the lot. Engine off, windows black, and for the first time the driver's door creaked open, a shape unfolding from within. Too tall, too thin, face obscured in the dark. And I realized with horror that I'd been wrong. The sedan wasn't just watching. It was delivering him. I backed away, breath sharp. When the back door of the station slammed, I spun. My double stood there. Bat in his hands now, my bat. He tapped it against his palm, smiling. "You're out of rules, Evan." My knees shook, the papers in my pocket felt heavy. Useless, I had broken too many. Bled too many. Maybe Harris was right. Maybe survival meant letting go. But I wasn't ready to vanish, not yet. I turned and ran into the desert, sand slipping under my shoes, breath tearing my lungs. Behind me I heard 2 sets of footsteps. One heavy, one too light, both chasing, both closing. And all I could think was that part 12 of this nightmare was already written, waiting for me, and I was running straight into it. The desert didn't forgive running. Every step I took dragged sand into my shoes, slowed me, tore at my lungs. The night was endless and dry, and the sound of footsteps behind me never faded. The light ones mocking, the heavy ones steady, patient, inevitable. I stumbled, nearly fell, the moon throwing long shadows across the dunes. When I looked back, I saw them, not blurred, not dreamlike, but solid. My double with the bat in his hands and the figure from the sedan, too tall, too thin. Its face still hidden like the darkness refused to let me see it. My chest burned, I thought of the rules. The damned laminated sheet I had folded in my pocket, crumpled from sweat and fear. Rule 1 through 7, broken, bent, ignored. And now Rule 8 had arrived, and somewhere at the bottom, Rule 12. The one Harris whispered about, the one nobody wanted to name. I pushed harder, legs screaming, until I saw a glow ahead. Pale neon in the shape of a half-dead sign. An abandoned diner that sat alone at the edge of the highway, its windows shattered, its booths coated in dust, but light still buzzed above the door as if daring me to come in. I had no choice. I shoved the door open, stumbled inside. The bell above it jingling like this was any other night, but the air was thick. Wrong. The diner wasn't empty. I froze because the booths were filled. Every seat taken by copies of me, dozens of them, all ages. All versions, some in uniform, some in plain clothes, some with scars I didn't recognize. All staring at me with flat eyes and that same wrong smile. My knees buckled. I nearly fell, but a hand caught my shoulder. I spun and saw Harris, his face pale, his hands trembling. "I told you not to come here," he rasped. "This is where they wait. This is where they choose." My throat tightened. "What are they?" Harris looked past me, voice breaking. "They're the ones who slipped through. The reflections that didn't stay reflections. The replacements that won. This place is a graveyard of what we used to be." The air vibrated. A sound low and sharp. I turned back. My double stepped through the doorway, dragging the bat, smiling wider than ever. The tall figure behind him ducking through, its head nearly scraping the ceiling. And when the door shut, the neon sign outside died, plunging us into flickering fluorescent light. Harris gripped my arm. "Listen to me, Evan. There's one rule left, Rule 12. And it's not written because once you know it, you can't unknow it. You can't survive without paying its price." I shook my head. Chest heaving, "Tell me." Harris closed his eyes. "Rule 12. To break the cycle, you must kill your reflection, but if you fail, it replaces you completely." The words hit me like a hammer. The booth shifted. The copies stood in unison. Their movements eerie, synchronized. They began to hum. The same heartbeat hum filling the room. My double stepped closer, bat raised. "End it, Evan. You know this is already mine." I gripped the knife I carried on night shifts, my only weapon, small, cheap, but real. My hands shook, sweat dripping down my temple. Harris backed away, whispering prayers. The tall figure leaned against the wall, silent, watching, judge and executioner. I screamed and lunged, swinging the knife at my double. But he was faster. The bat slammed into my side. Pain exploded, ribs shattering. I dropped to one knee, gasping. But somehow my knife caught his arm, tearing flesh, blood that looked too dark spilling. He snarled, not in my voice this time, but something deeper, older. I forced myself up. Stabbed again, wild, desperate, the knife plunging into his chest. His eyes widened, his smile faltered, and for the first time I saw fear on his face. He dropped the bat, staggered back, gasping. The hum around us shattered into silence. The copies froze, their heads snapping toward him, and one by one they flickered out like dying bulbs until only he remained, collapsing onto the tile, blood spreading, his body twitching before going still. The tall figure straightened, stepped forward. For a moment I thought it would finish me, claim me anyway, but it stopped, tilted its head, and in a voice that wasn't sound but pressure in my skull, it said, "You survived Rule 12." I shook, barely standing. So what now? The figure leaned close, the darkness around its face peeling back just enough to reveal nothing. Not a face but a void, and from that void words crawled. "Now you live with the knowing." And then it was gone. The diner empty, the neon dead. Harris gone too, leaving me alone in the silence. I stumbled outside, collapsed against my car. Dawn bleeding across the desert horizon. My side screaming with pain, but I was alive. Alive when I shouldn't be. Alive with the memory of killing myself. When I finally crawled back behind the counter at the station, the laminated sheet still crumpled in my pocket. I unfolded it with shaking hands. Rules 1 through 11 clear as day, and at the bottom, space where Rule 12 had always been blank. Now ink bled across the laminate, words scrawled in my own handwriting. Rule 12, kill your reflection before it kills you. My stomach twisted because I didn't remember writing it, didn't remember touching a pen. I stared at it until my vision blurred, until the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, terrified, but it was just a customer, a trucker buying gas. He nodded at me. Normal, human, but when he smiled I froze, because for a split second his smile was mine, my wrong smile before it faded back to normal, and I realized Rule 12 wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, and that maybe I had survived the night. But the cycle wasn't broken, not really. I leaned on the counter, gripping it until my knuckles whitened, and I whispered to whoever was listening, maybe to you right now. If you ever find yourself working a night shift in the desert, remember the rules, every single one, because they're not just stories, they're lifelines. And if you ever see yourself smiling back at you from somewhere it shouldn't be, don't hesitate, don't blink, don't give it a chance, my voice cracked, tears burning my eyes, because I've already paid the price, and next time it might be you.